Okay, we are here. Focus Matters, episode 5. This will be. This one's going to be exciting. So today I've managed to loop in Major Nicholas Clifton Caraballo, aka Bane. I think it's going to be a fantastic conversation. It's going to be really interesting. I'm not gonna spoil it by trying to introduce you and then butcher your placement in weapons school. So I'm just going to pass the mic and ask for you to give us the highlights of who you are, what you do today, and then we'll start to explore the past a little bit and how you got here as we go.
Sure. Well, first, Noah, thanks for having me on. You and I have known each other, I think, for a few months now, but one of those instant, quick connections, see things very similar, especially in some of our different pursuits. Divergent as they have been, they converge in a lot of different areas, so which I think is really cool in there. So this has been on my calendar now for, I think, a couple weeks, and I put it at the end of a Friday where I was flying intentionally because it's like between fly in the morning and then come talk to you in the afternoon. Probably no better way to end a week in there, especially in the middle of a government shutdown that is challenging things as it is. So
indeed.
But yep, Major Caraballo, I go by Bane. Been in the Air Force now for 13 years, F-15E driver by background, and currently my role is in the test community, but 3 different ops assignments. First one at Mountain Home. So ops is kind of what you would think of you saw Operation Midnight Hammer, where we went and bombed Iran. Ops units execute the mission. So FTU is your formal training unit, ops, and then you have weapons school in there for those. I'll probably use a lot of acronyms. You'll have to catch me and ask me to explain those.
I will. We'll break them down for the general audience.
So my first assignment was at Mountain Home. Did my combat deployment there as lieutenant, and then spent 3 years from about 2015 to 2018. Moved to Lakenheath, which is over in the United Kingdom, out in England. Spent 3 glorious years there. Did a year and a half in the Bowlers, and then went to weapons school for 6 months, which I'll get into what that is here in just a second. And then went back and was a Tier 1 in the Panthers, the lead weapons officer there. And then in 2021, I came back to the weapons school to teach. I spent 2021 to mid-2025 as an instructor at the weapons school, finishing as the chief of integration, basically running the large force exercises that we do as our capstone graduation event, and kind of the leader of that. And then now just recently switched over to be the 53rd Wing Director of Integration. So kind of a similar role, but at a wing level for the operational test wing for the United States Air Force in there. So what is weapons school? Because I think we're going to spend a decent amount of time talking about kind of the cognitive demands of flying and whatnot.
So I'll jump in here, right? Because I'm always, I love all the conversations within the Department of War, and you're one of the more gracious folks that understands that many of us don't speak acronyms. It's one of the few times where I've actually been in conversations and someone's had a complete sentence without a single verb and only acronyms. But so the weapons school from the outside in for the reference point, I think everybody is, it's the Top Gun of the Air Force, right? And that may be misleading as well, because having been to Top Gun, I understand that it is not what you see in the Tom Cruise movies. Like, a lot of that is completely on its head. So weapons school is the top tier instruction or instructor facility where you're really taking the best existing pilots across combat command, and you're doing a train the trainer, and you're making them the best pilot instructors they can be, and then sending them back to their units in order to be able to raise the bar. Is that close?
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it. So there's kind of 3 primary things that we want the weapons officers, the graduates, we call them WUGs when they're here as students, weapons school undergraduate. And then they're weapons officers when they graduate. They wear a patch that looks a little bit like this.
Nice.
It's kind of how you identify them. And so we want them to be the lead tactician and instructor in their squadron. So they'll go back and they'll do what's called a Tier 1 assignment. You heard me allude to that. And that is, they are leading their squadron, oftentimes as a captain. They're on the front edge, right? We're the only branch that puts the most trust in its youngest people, right? People are like, we went and bombed Iran. Like, the oldest person on that sortie, there's a couple of lieutenant colonels sprinting in, but you're talking about weapons officers that are captains and majors going to conduct a massive operation, right? And it was massive in there. So the lead tactician and the lead instructor, which there's a massive amount of responsibility that comes with that. You're your commander's number 1 advisor when it comes to tactical things. So the commander is turning to the weapons officer And they're in the squadron in the Air Force is typically a squadron commander and then a director of operations. And then you have your weapons officer in there. So you're at a minimum number 3. And depending on the personality of your DO, a lot of times those things are kind of equal, and they'll handle the up and out operations and you handle inside the squadron in there.
So
for that.
Clearly a big responsibility role. Big
Yeah,
responsibility,
awesome.
not only in terms of leading, but also advising, right? So it's
Totally.
both. So as we talk about the world of cognition, those are 2 different skill sets. There's the ability to perform, put me in a plane, put me in a cockpit, let me do my thing. And you may be incredibly skilled at that. And we'll talk about the mind-blowing requirements of being able to operate these systems. But then at the same time, you have to be able to articulate, you have to be able to debrief, and you have to create logic and reason so that you can advise. Does that sound right?
It does. And
Okay.
I don't know if we'll get into it, but you have the classic Simon Sinek, like high trust, high skill dilemma here. Because a lot of times you get the most phenomenal stick and rudder, right? Everybody thinks weapons school and they think pilots, but there's more than just that, right? We have ABMs, we have Intel, all sorts of cyberspace, et cetera, in there. You have the dudes that are incredibly talented, but man, they're just not fun to work with. And so you spend a lot of time building up this humility and making sure that they're able to go out there and be humble, be approachable, and be incredible as they lead their squadrons and kind of build the future.
Well, it's interesting. So when I looked at your background, you fly your plane of choice is the F-15, right? The Strike Eagle. And what I read is part of the reason you chose that is because it requires more teamwork. Is that accurate?
It is. Yeah, it is accurate. I still get crap from my single seat buddies being in the positions I've been in. I would call myself an integrator for the last like 4 years. So not just across the Air Force, but across the Joint Force. And I always get crap from my single seat buddies like, oh, you need a Wizzo to do your job. And I was like, no, I prefer to have a teammate because a good team, I think, goes a lot further than a single individual ever can.
So Wizzo, for somebody who doesn't understand Air Force, is
Weapons Systems Officer. So you can think
it's the guy in the back
Goose,
seat.
Yeah, Goose and Top Gun. We got to make a friggin' Air Force movie. But he was a CISO, or not. Mm-hmm. The F-14 dudes are going to yell at me when they hear that. He's not technically a CISO. I can't remember what a RIO, radar intercept officer, was what the Navy used to call the backseaters in the F-14s. But same thing, sits in the back. We have divisions of duties, kind of different ways that we do different things to achieve the same effect, or sometimes we're kind of overlapping. It just kind of depends on the mission set and where you're at.
So in addition to the data that you're receiving from all the instrumentation, the heads-up display, all of that, you're actually having to communicate in real time, not only with the people outside of the cockpit, because I'm sure you're constantly getting input from base and from command, but you got another person behind you, and you have to be coordinating efforts as well. Is that
totally? Yeah.
So interesting.
To give a breakdown of how a mission might work just inside of a 4-ship, to give you the idea of the human beings involved. Let's say there's 4 of us. We typically operate in what we call a 4-ship, so 4 different jets in there. So that means 8 humans in the Strike Eagle. 4 in most F-35, F-22, F-16 are all single seat in there. So those 4 jets will go out and conduct a mission. From a sensory input perspective, most jets have 3 to 4 displays that you're looking at. And I say displays, there's some 5th gen and some nice new called like one display, but you'll break them up into different kind of sections for different purposes in there. Then for us, inner cockpit comms, and then inner formation comms. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all talking to each other. And then comms from C2, and then a visual lookout. And so you start to really quickly amass the different ways that you're getting data. And then the one that nobody talks about, and it comes with a little bit of experience, is like that. I just call it like that feeling or the gut, like something is not quite right here. And it takes dudes a while to be able to figure out how to listen out of like, we're in a weird spot and I don't know what to do, or we're in a weird spot and I've been here before and I know what to do. So you can really quickly start to stack up a lot of different sources for information. And it's interesting to watch over time how dudes prioritize. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally.
So I would describe that. I mean, it sounds like you're talking about really somatic awareness. So I've got all this technology, but at the same time, I still need to be in touch with how my body, how my mind is processing that information, because it may give me indicators that the data does not. Is that right?
100%.
Yeah. I would imagine most people wouldn't think of when you're flying an F-15 that intuition is a big part of the equation. So that's really interesting. Yeah.
It's a huge part, right? And you think it's interesting, right? Because it's really easy to focus on what are you doing in your cockpit, in your formation, in your package, right? A number of formations put together. But you have to remember there's somebody else on the other side, right? And we're just talking air. We haven't even talked about like surface, space, land, all the different domains that exist in there. But there's somebody else on the other side. So not only are you trying to interpret all this information, but you're trying to understand what this information means in terms of now what are they thinking in there? What is this chess, like 3D chess back and forth. So which is where I think that a lot of that intuition comes from, is like I'm seeing certain things and experience tells me, or this gut feeling tells me this is a bad place to be in, or this is probably the next couple sets of moves that are going to happen as we run our intercept. How do I be prepared for that? How do I get in front of that?
Now, this is chess at what speed? Literally, what's your airspeed?
So we'll usually commit at 0.95 Mach. So from a Mach perspective, you can just think of 1.0 Mach would be going 10 miles a minute. Your airspeed's hard to say because it depends on altitude. But today I did an air-to-air sortie today where it was a 6-ship of Eagles and Vipers fighting against a 4-ship of F-35s. And when we're closing at each other, we're closing at over 1,500 miles an hour in there. So thankfully we start like decently far away, 80 to 90 miles away. So you have a couple minutes to figure out what you're doing before you hit the merge if you get that far.
Okay, so that's interesting as a framework. So you have a couple minutes to figure it out. But eventually, but eventually you're in seconds, right?
For sure.
And
I would
end
say
up in seconds range.
Oh, big time. And so I say you have a couple minutes to figure it out, but at the ranges you're starting and the ranges that we take shots these days, right, are very far away. And when you start talking about what are the information that I need to make, you're at seconds pretty quickly into the intercept. You're like, okay, I have this window to take my shots before I need to be doing a follow-on action. Now I'm seeing electronic attack over here, and the formation I thought I was targeting is over here. And by the way, right, I'm still having to fly my aircraft. Right, I equate it to people like, oh, I'll take a step back for a second. Pilot training, get all excited about this. And when I graduate pilot training, I realize if I was a banker, all I know how to do right now is drive to work. I don't even know how to log into my computer and do all my banking things. So imagine driving your car, texting, being on your laptop, and being on the phone at the same time. And it's a little bit bigger sky than like your 2 to 4 lane highway. So there's less people trying to hit you all the time, but you still have to do kind of your basic job.
Well, that's what I was going to go to. It's so interesting that we are, we're very diligent as a society. Don't text and drive, it's distraction. It's going to lead to death. And you're literally, as you say, you're not only texting, driving, going 10 times, 20 times, 30 times faster than a car, as well as on the phone, as well as communicating. Oh, and then you got your co-pilot in the back seat that you have to communicate with. So cognitive load, it's interesting. I had somebody, when I think about cognitive load, I had somebody, a neurotrainer recently, who was fairly new to it, and they spent like 3 minutes in it, and they got out and they were exhausted. And they said, how long do people actually spend in these kind of platforms, these intense VR cognitive platforms? And I said, our average training is about 7 minutes. People can go 15, 30. At 30, most people get, kind of fatigued. It blew his mind. He's like, I couldn't do 30. I'd be wrecked for the day. And how long are you in a mission?
Yeah, that's a good question. Before I forget, I also should tell you we have 3 radios in the jet. So 3 radios plus the human and being in the back could be going off at the same time from a listening standpoint. But
and 3 radios, all input coming in through the same means, all coming in just ambient sound or through the gear?
through the headset. You can attenuate the volume, and we have some cool headset that you can plug in, and I can have one radio tied to one ear and the other. So there's some ways to differentiate, but it's a lot of information.
Does your corpus callosum ever start to steam when you do that?
It's funny you say that. We call task saturation or kind of loss of situational awareness, loss of SA. We call it helmet fire. Right? Like, helmet fire. Yep. that dude over there. And you can always hear it in somebody's voice, usually about 30 seconds after the fire has started. And like, so number one's lost.
All right, let's come back to that.
For sure.
I'm writing that down.
For sure. That's a fun one. Time-wise, so I'll give you the day in the life, and this varies.
Great.
So I try and capture some varied, but I'll show up about 2.5 hours prior to takeoff and do an hour brief right? So it's 60 minutes of usually one person communicating to the large package, then the smaller formation. And then we might do some crew coord if I haven't flown with this person ever before. Pretty rare at Nellis, but it happens in ops where you haven't flown with somebody. So you make sure that you've got the crew coordination down.
So let's take this one step at a time, because I think part of what makes this so interesting is the cognitive challenge changes from stage to stage, right? Something else, something we've talked about. So I may be great on the stick. I can process, tons of information, visual speed of processing off the hook, task switching off the charts. But now I got to sit and listen to somebody, right? That's where it starts. It's a very different skill set.
Massive. And one that we're not as good at, I think, as we used to be. Right? Because I'm like, I need to check my phone.
Check my phone.
I don't have a phone in the vault. I can't check my phone. Okay. I have 4 other jobs that I do. I want to make sure I do this. Wait, he just said something different than the 3-1. 3-1 is like our Bible. Like we do everything in accordance with our tactics, techniques, and procedures, which are written down in the 3-1. Like that was different than 3-1. What led to this? Now I'm behind in the brief, right? And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you get we're not like special. Right? We train differently. We do things different. We do a different job than most people, but we're just humans. And
we still have brains. Yeah.
We still have brains that want to go in
You're not hybridized
machines
directions yet, right?
No.
You're not cyborgs. Yeah.
No. And so and there's 2 challenges in the brief, right? There's the challenge of the human beings listening, right? And making sure that they're processing the information. Okay, this is the plan. This is how so-and-so wants to execute the mission today. And then there's the other side is the communication of that, and making sure that you are reading the room and understanding that and picking up on the nonverbal as well as the verbal cues when there's two-way interaction. The best flights, the best sorties I've ever been a part of, the briefer is very, very attuned to the formation that they're briefing. They can tell when somebody doesn't understand the plan that they've laid out, right? And they'll stop and they'll have it like, hey, I see you have a question, right? What is that? What's going on there? Like, I'm confused about this. Like, okay, very engaged, right? So a little bit of that kind of active listening, but in reverse as you have that two-way in there. And that generally leads to a better synchronization as you transition. That task switching goes from, hey, am I listening, to now applying what we just listened to in there. So a lot of challenges that happen just in the briefing room that, I'll be honest, we kind of take for granted. Like, I'm going to go sit listen to this brief, 60 minutes. I bet I know 90% of what's going to happen, right? And then move on. So there's things that can get lost in the sauce. And I think there's missed opportunities as well to move the ball down the road, or to make sure that we are actually getting better every single time we do that. And some of that's on us, right? We have this thing called motherhood. And motherhood is the admin portion of the sortie. It should take between 4 and 6 minutes, depending on where you're going in the airspace. And we brief it the exact same thing every time. And there's benefits to that, right? It's the thing that gets me into the zone. Like, okay, I'm going, but
there's a ritual. There's a ritual quality to it. Yeah,
totally. But no, I can't tell you the last time I actually listened to somebody's motherhood.
Yeah.
It's set for the first time a student briefs me, and then I'm just making sure that they understand Nellis. I'm very focused on that. But then after that, it's like, okay, it's like the wind down from whatever I was doing outside the vault and the brief, and the spin up in there. So, but that's 4 to 6 minutes that we could get back. And we do the same thing for TAC admin. And so there's some chunks in there of like, hey, how do we better optimize this so we're not spending 60 minutes, which we know is outside of the focus span of most human beings, right? Can I shrink that down inside of an actual time of useful consciousness to get better understanding of the plan, better learning, better progress?
Well, I mean, so I think about this from a focus challenge. So most of the research suggests you'll have a 90-minute cycle of focus, right? And you'll peak in that 90 minutes and then you're going to hit a trough. You also are not choosing when this is happening. So I work from home and I've got it all. I've got my circadian, my ultradian rhythms dialed in, and I try to schedule things appropriately. Oh, this is really important. I want to be at a peak. You're at the whim of the schedule. So you're starting, and I think you mentioned this, you're sitting for 60 minutes, passive, having to receive information, a little bit of interaction. So trying not to be distracted. It's interesting you said, and you've already read the brief. So there's nothing new here. So they're reviewing information. So there's this challenge of paying attention to something that you're already familiar with. So an interesting amount of drain. Then you get this transition period. I'm just repeating back. Course correct me as we go, right? You get this next phase of motherhood, which makes a ton of sense ritualistically, and it makes a lot of sense in terms of consistency, but it's rote. So now you're going from, I'm paying attention because I don't want to miss, to, well, now I'm doing whatever I need to do internally in order to get ready for this next phase, because now is when it's really going to get active.
Let me course correct just a little bit.
Please.
Motherhood is at the very beginning of the brief. Motherhood is part of the brief.
Got it.
So that's the thing that like starts it. So it can go, but it's exactly what you just said. The things that you're kind of leaning into there is like, hey, the brief, 60 minutes, motherhood goes at the beginning. Ritualistic can spin me up, can put me into focus, or can put me to sleep, allow me to continue to get distracted in there. But what you're saying, where you're going, if you don't mind, is the thing that happens after the brief is we usually have about 20 minutes to do what we call step. Right. And so before I keep going past that, one of the things you mentioned is like your optimized circadian rhythm must be really nice. We are at the whim of a wild airspace schedule. So on one day, I could be briefing at 6 a.m, right? Which means for me, I'll usually wake up at like 4 a.m., right? Eat some breakfast, get a quick workout in, and then make sure that I'm at the brief on time. But the next day, I could have a 1300 takeoff. Right. And so you're talking like moving right or moving left. We tend not to move people left on the schedule, but the circadian rhythm is another factor that factors into that. So your brief, motherhood, like I said, just a portion of the brief that as an example of like a thing where I think we waste time and don't capitalize on that, call it peak of focus that we might get in that 60 minutes. Then we take a 20 minutes, you go to the bathroom, you get suited up. So you put a G suit on, harness, grab your helmet bag, make sure you have any snacks if it's going to be a long sortie, you're hydrated in there. And then you go to the step desk, and everybody has kind of their own little routine. It's one of the few unstructured parts of the day where you can kind of do whatever as long as you show up to the step desk on time. And it's all anecdotal. I would love to do like a study of like, hey, how do you perform when you execute like the same thing over and over and over again during step? And then how do you perform when you kind of meander and do whatever? Like you'll see dudes go check their email and be like, hey, I got to do something real quick. We say your tactical bubble gets popped, right? I was focused on tactics in the brief, and now I'm worried about something else. Sometimes that's the demands of the job. And there, so you do the step in there, but that's kind of your time period to go, okay, I was just, as you were describing, sitting, very passively receiving information, trying to focus, maybe trying to stay awake. Right. And now we're getting ready to go do the thing. By the time we've stepped, we're about an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes into the work day. And then you go drive the golf cart out to the flight line, hop in the jet, and ground ops is about an hour prior to takeoff. And so ground ops is walk around the jet, make sure that it's got all the things it's supposed to, check the forms, make sure that you're legal to take it, hop in the jet, start it up, get all the systems running. Usually takes, if nothing's wrong, we don't have to do a red ball, which is like, hey, this system is broken. Can you come do some work on it? Right. Jets aren't like cars. You don't like something breaks and take it into the shop. Crew chiefs just come out and fix it for the most part, and then they'll do routine maintenance in the hangar.
Just like the airlines.
yeah, totally. Right, but it's usually about a 40-minute process to get the jet started up and ready to go. And so about 20 minutes prior to takeoff, we'll get armed up. So make sure that if we're shooting any missiles or dropping any bombs, those can come off the jet. It just means the jet is armed. Taxi out to the end of the runway, and then you start to do, again, a very ritualistic and now very formalized process where you go through a radio drill to make sure all of your comms work. You'll do some kind of, in that radio drill, you'll pass some information. And that's where the over the years, the body starts to go, okay, yep, we're going to go do the thing again. We're going to start wake up. And if you haven't switched tests, kind of switched over your mode of operation by then, you're definitely starting that by the time you're in the EOR, which stands for end of runway.
So there's some built-in sort of activation triggers here.
Totally.
Does that sound right? Yeah.
I think there is, if you use them that way.
Yeah.
There's also another hour and 20 minutes, as we basically just described it, to let the mind wander, right? And I think that's something that's really important to call out is we are really, 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 really good when you start talking in the Air Force, especially about our technology and our systems, at implementing these deliberate processes to make sure that when it's time, that the technology can perform as best as it was designed to. Right. And there's always caveats in there, but we're really good at that. Maintenance has some phenomenal processes. We have some really smart people that work on the jets, and the jets are ready to go. They go perform the job in there. But largely, when you look at the human in the Air Force, right, aside from some chunks that largely are, in my opinion, and a number of us that are working on kind of modernizing education in the weapons school, are outdated. There are these massive chunks in the day or in the mission process where you're like, hope this person just shows up and is ready to go. Hope Bane's over there getting his mind right, getting his body right, and getting prepped to actually go do the mission. We don't necessarily arm folks with a lot of really good tools to go recognize, hey, you're not in the state space that you need to be in. Your nervous system is sending up tons of red flags right now, and you're missing them. And even if they do, right, dudes start to know. A lot of dudes after a mission in the beginning of the debrief, you'll ask them like, hey, off day today, when did you realize that was going to happen? They're like, I knew at step this was going to be a bad day. I'm like, oh man, I wish we had taken the time to recognize that and then apply some tools that we have given you, or if we haven't given you those tools yet, give you those tools. But it's just kind of this haphazard, the human will catch up with the machine in there. So I didn't say that the most eloquent way, but what I'm trying to say is that the human is not deliberately focused on when it comes to kind of how do you make sure that it is optimized and ready to go for the demand of the task that you're about to ask of it.
Which is interesting for several different reasons. One of them is within air combat control, within ACC, the program, the human performance program, is called Optimization of Human Weapon Systems, right?
That's right. Yeah, OHWS.
So in theory, from the outside in, depending on your filter. So I look at everything sort of through this brain cognitive filter. So I hear, operation of human weapon systems. Man, they've got to really be focusing on the cognitive. But then when you actually break it down and you look at the curriculum, it's actually not that at all. And I don't say this as a criticism, it's just a fact. It's very much based on the physical. It's based on looking at what are the requirements for you to be able to withstand the G-force that you're about to be subjected to. And then this also boggles my mind. And then be able to head check, right? Be able to look over your shoulder, and when you're pulling, how many Gs?
Up to nine and a half, depending. Yeah.
So I can understand where mechanistically, because it seems very similar. Like this is what the Air Force is really good at. We look at things mechanistically. So we look at the technology mechanistically. We look at the human being mechanistically. We know we need to have strong posterior kinetic chain. We know we need to be able to hold this neutral spine. We need to be able to withstand these G-forces. But to your point, if my head's not in the game, and I'm assuming during the curriculum, there is no, let's teach you how to be self-aware. Let's teach you these recovery techniques. Let's teach you these activation techniques. So kind of like in sport, a lot of people are figuring it out on their own. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. So we've made some strides in the last couple of years. We've formally implemented a human performance program in the weapons school. And I would love to tell you we nailed it. And we learned all the lessons from OHWS and CRAFT, and CRAFT is the AETC, so Air Education Training Command version. It's an acronym too. I don't remember what CRAFT stands for though. But optimizing the human weapon system's great, but it started out by potentially solving the wrong problem or not understanding the problem fully, which we're really good at in the Air Force. We don't intend to miss the mark, but we'll throw a solution at what we think is the problem without ever assessing and measuring the problem, right? And OHWS's problem it was trying to solve is we started doing these surveys. It was starting right around when I got to my first ops assignment of like, do you have neck pain? Do you have back pain? And the honest answer for every fighter pilot is yes.
Right.
Right. There is nothing
the reporting answer is going to be, no, I'm good.
Nailed it. Yeah. Nope.
Oh,
This is a trap. Somebody's trying to DNIF me. Duties not including flying. DNIF for that one, DNIF. But slowly, dudes started to go, well, this is anonymous. They started to change how the reporting happened. I'm like, yeah, So right around 2018 or 2019, General Brown at the time, CSAF, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, was like, hey, here's $25 million. Fix this problem in my fighter pilots. I need my warfighters. And so with $25 million and no KPIs and no real, like what we're just going to fix necks and backs, you throw athletic trainers, massage therapists, and strength coaches at a problem.
Correct.
Which is a great start. And it kicked the door wide open for us to be having this conversation right now about human performance. So that's a long way of saying it was a good start, but we didn't actually try and identify what the problem is. And we did the same thing at the weapons school unintentionally, but with cognitive. And we're like, okay, we know cognitive is important. I know that the real key to success in warfighting in the Air Force writ large, maybe except for our half-spec war bubbas, so think JTACs, CCTs, the bubbas that get embedded with your SEAL teams and your Tier 1 units.
Yep.
Right? Those are really the only PJs. Somebody's going to be offended because I left them out, but those are really your only kind of really physically demanding jobs, and they're also cognitively, but I don't need to be able to run and carry a 50-pound ruck, right? I need to be able to withstand G-forces. It's a different level of fitness. So we looked at that and we go, okay, we got to figure out the cognitive side of this. We teamed up with the test. The same wing I'm in now had a program called Astro, and we're like, hey, we're going to try a bunch of interventions. So we oriented everything on the flow cycle, right? I can't remember if it was episode 1 or 2. One of your guests was talking about Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and flow, and we brought in a company, Optimal. They're still a great partner with us. And we're like, hey, teach us about flow. What should we be doing? Right? And you're like, oh, breath work, right? We're going to do some cold plunges, right? We're going to do saunas. We're going to do all this stuff. We even went so far.
Which just, again, for the audience, is not part of flow. It's part of the larger optimizing human performance.
No,
Most people don't get in a state of flow when you throw them in a cold plunge, but
that turns out
understood.
That's correct, right?
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, okay, I want to figure out, can I get people into flow more? Right. And you'll laugh at that if you take a step back and you go, well, when do you want to be in flow when you're in a fighter? Right. Because it's selfless, effortless, and time. You lose like kind of your sense of time
dilation.
You get this deep sense of enrichment. Right. Those are like the 4 things that go with flow. And you're like, ugh, that might not be the state I want to be in when I'm killing people. You know what I mean? To put it really, really bluntly. Now,
to get to the blunt point, yeah. Right.
Maybe it is, depending on like what arena you're in. But maybe I want to be in flow when I'm studying. Maybe I want to be in flow when I'm leading a debrief. I'll tell you some of my best debriefs I've ever led, and that's not like my evaluation, but that is feedback. I don't remember. Right? I'm just up there in this state, and like I can see the matrix, and I'm loving it. And I look up, I'm like, wow, that was a ton of fun. We get this really good feedback. You're like, I hope somebody wrote some things down, because I don't actually remember all the things that we talked about, but it went really well. And you're like, oh, looking back, like you're in flow. So we are really anchored on flow, but anchored on interventions, not necessarily tied to flow. And it's like, do we even need to be in flow? Actually, wait, what is the cognitive thing that what are we trying to make better? And so all that to say, we have a program now that's focused in the curriculum on, hey, we're measuring your problems. We're doing a bunch of kind of data collect to understand what's going on. But in the meantime, here's some education on how your nervous system works, right? We kind of teach it in this gas, steering, brakes method, and how to recognize that.
So you're teaching sympathetic, parasympathetic. You're starting to go over basic breathing techniques, introducing, forced hyperventilation for activation, long exhales, and holds for sympathetic. Okay.
Yep, totally. But the bigger focus now is on, let's understand the picture of do we have a problem? We'll just say understand the picture of the problem space, teach them basic awareness, and then make them aware that resources are available for them to come and kind of look at and gain interest on their own. It's kind of as opposed to forcing people to sit in a room together and do breath work and feel awkward about it.
Interesting. I want to go back to the flow comment because you and I've talked about this. I'm a lifelong martial artist. I take breaks, but it's part of how I define myself. And for some reason, have always been fascinated with sort of ancestral Japan, ancient Japan. And you could argue very much that, in the Zen tradition, in the Bushido tradition, that whether it's the true modern state of flow, but this idea of effortless effort is very much associated with combat, just as combat in broader sense, perhaps easier in the analog form. So when I'm doing my thing and I'm sparring, it's hands, it's sticks, we do fake knives, but I always perform better when I can get into something close to that state. And time does dilate, and you're definitely getting feedback, right? Feedback's one of the key indicators. You're getting live feedback. So the idea that you could potentially maintain this, but then again be back in that sensory rich environment, that deeply rich environment, feels almost supernatural. Like it feels like it would surprise me that somebody would come back from a sortie and say, "Oh yeah, I was in flow," during that mission. But to your point, it has great strength in other parts. It has strengths on the front end and the back end, and then let alone recovery, right? So, I mean, how do you feel? So we got up to, we were following this trajectory. We were on the runway. You were doing your mechanical check. That's about an hour overall. Then you take off. how long are you going to be in the air? How long is the mission going to run?
Yeah, so it's a good question. It's the answer is always it depends at the weapons school, but it could be as short as we do everything in hours, right? So you like a 1.5, a 0.5, or whatever. So if I'm just going up to do basic fighter maneuvers, which first Top Gun movie where they're kind of turning with each other, and they're anywhere from 0.7 to 1.0 in there, so about an hour. If I'm going to do like the sortie I flew today was a 1.3, so an hour and 18 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
In there, I flew a sortie a couple weeks ago that was a 4.5, so 4.5 hours. And then about a month ago, we were doing a large force exercise. I flew a 7-hour sortie in there. So you have a wide variety, and these are all training sorties. None of these are combat. Your combat missions right now in CENTCOM are somewhere between 4 and 8 hours, depending on what they're doing in there. And that's very different than your training mission. You take off. So to your point about you take off, you'll do some admin. Right. So think like check your blinkers, make sure that your steering wheel works. Right.
Okay.
Make sure that a couple of your sensors are working. There's no analogy for sensors on the car in there, but make sure your Tesla video cameras are working.
Yeah. Right.
If you have one of those,
your headlights are working.
Yeah. Essentially all the things you need to fight are good to go from a training sense. And then you'll kind of marshal the forces, get everybody together, and then you start fighting. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes max to do that admin part that I talked about. And then fights will last, depending on the type of fights will last anywhere from 25 minutes to 45 minutes for your like day-to-day stuff. Sometimes we have massive large force exercises where we have hundreds of aircraft in the air, and those are like 2 or 3 hour long fights, but there's like kind of peaks and valleys in all of that. And to your point about flow, I've definitely found myself in flow while fighting. And those also tend to correlate to my best sorties. It's not it's less of totally. Right. You want to think about like, so right, one of the things that's nice about flow, right, is you lose kind of all that sense of self-preservation, right, that risk averseness. You point your jet at the ground, 90 degrees nose low, going 0.95 Mach, right, and then the recovery rules that we go is every 1,000 feet is about 10 degrees nose low. That means at 9,000 feet, I can be pointed straight now. And you can do the math about how quick you're starting to recover. And there, but you look at that, and if you're not in some sort of like almost altered state, it can be super uncomfortable, and you start to kind of second guess yourself in there. Okay. And so that helps that part with some of the things that we're doing. And then the time dilation piece. So flow, it's not to say flow is a bad thing for combat. I tend to agree with you. My comment is more oriented at what we'll talk about, I think, here in a little bit is, you can only be in flow for so long. I wish I could be in flow forever. That would be incredible. But I have to have, I have to have my brake on the front end and kind of my recovery on the back end, and then all my loading and whatnot that goes on. Well, it's somewhere I have to recover. And so what is my goal at the weapons school? What is my goal while I'm in combat, right? In combat, I probably want to be in flow as much as I possibly can. If I could pick and choose, there'd be certain spots, but we know that's not how it works. But if I need somebody to absorb a massive amount of information on the backside of a sortie and they were just in flow, well, they probably need to go take a nap. You know what I mean? We got to go take a break.
Well, even if they weren't in flow. I mean, because coming back to the amount of cognitive load you're developing, right? I mean, you're doing, so we will often say that the most difficult cognitive task from an energy expenditure is task switching.
Yes.
And you have just described the richest task switching environment that I mean, again, I can't quite imagine it. I've tried to get to some simulators so I can get a sort of a visual sense. And then when I was at Eglin, they let me do Map B. And so, so for people who don't know, it's very simple cognitive training, some assessment. I say simple mechanistically, but you're basically cycling on a computer with a joystick between 5 different tasks. And it's probably, well, you would tell me, it's a 10th of the amount of data and responsibility?
Sure. Yeah, if that, I think. And it depends on what's going on and what you're doing. And I'll give some credit to our industry partners. They have built some incredible fusion capability that takes a lot of information and kind of strips away and gives us the signal through the noise.
That's great.
If you will. But at any given time, right, I may have my symbology limit on my primary display that I'm using for orienting myself in the airspace and knowing, whereas this is at 200.
200.
So I have 200 entities on my display, which is, by the way, a 4-inch 4.5 inch by 4.5 inch. I think it's 240 pixel color display from the 1990s.
Okay.
Right. So I have that, and then I have 2 monochrome. So think like Pong, green and black displays that are have lower symbology limits that I'm using to fuse all my information together. So yeah, 10th is probably right. And then to manipulate that, we have what's called HOTAS, so hands on throttle and stick. So on my throttle, I have 7 buttons, or sorry, on my stick, I have 7 buttons. And then on my throttle, I think I have 5. And different combinations of and actuations of those buttons do different things to manipulate the information and change my displays how I want. And all that's habit, right? It's just habit patterns.
Training.
Training in there, and then understanding all that. But yeah, you're certainly doing a lot of task switching in that fight. And then to close out the time conversation of that, when you get done and you kind of have this adrenaline rush, which lessens over time, right? The more and more you do it, I think it becomes more normalized. Now you have to drive the car home and park it in the garage, right? So you have to bring the foreship back home and do the admin phase. And if you look at a lot of the history of like accident reports and safety mishaps and whatnot,
you're gonna happen
a lot of it happens on takeoff or landing, or kind of those to and from phases.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So and that would be the sortie.
Especially at the end. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, especially at the end, because again, we all use the references we know. If you get to, a really intense sparring session, and it's a lot of physical exertion, but it's a lot of cognitive exertion, and there's a lot of norepinephrine, a lot of adrenaline. The smart people do not get in their car and drive home.
Yep.
Right. The
sit there
smart
for a
people, sit there for a little bit, eat, get some sugar in your system, not protein, give me sugar. Brain needs sugar. Get back online. You almost don't even have that, because you've got to get, as you say, you got to get the car back in the garage.
Hey.
When you're done, I mean, does everybody just take a nap?
No. So the day isn't even. So what I've just described, and what I'm trying to give you is a picture of the weapons school day. So different ops units will be kind of left and right of this in terms of time span. So let's say we flew a 1.5, right? So all of that kind of starts about, we'll just make it easy to do math, about 2.5 hours prior to takeoff. So right now we're at 4 hours into the day, not counting the wake up, drive, whatever. 4 hours into the workday in there. You land. It takes about an hour to get the jet shut down, to go to maintenance, fill out the forms, make sure, report anything that's wrong with the jet so they can do the great work that they do. Right. And go to AFE, so air crew flight equipment, which is where all my G suit, get undressed. About an hour to an hour and 20 minutes, I'm back in the building. Right. Well, now we got to debrief. And so, right, you think about it, it'd be like watching tapes after the game,
right?
Taking notes, learning, right? And so there's debrief. You usually start between 2.5 hours and 3 hours after landing. So you are 7 hours into your workday, and now the most important part of the day is going to happen, because if you don't learn anything from this sortie, you're going to make the same mistakes tomorrow. Right. And like in the short term, you're like, great, I hook so I don't pass student non-progression, or SNP, right? And I'm stuck in the syllabus, and we want to make you better. But in the long run, like if you're not learning every single day that you're flying, we're not getting better at the job. And then when the call comes, you can't go do the job, which the consequences of that are fairly significant. Not something we think about every day, but that's kind of where you're going in there. So about 7 hours into your day is when we're going to start the debrief process.
And there's a break between sort of parking the car, getting out of your suit, and the brief?
I'll say break. I would love to go take a nap, right? Do some non-sleep deep breath, something like that.
So again, most of the time, you got to be tired at this point, right? There's got to be some fatigue.
I think early in my career, I remember being tired a lot, and I may be a bad person to ask, because I'm generally fatigued in my days anyway. I think you just get used to it. You also you're still working. So you park the car. There is a minute where you're like, whew, I'm tired. Grab some food, grab some hydration. And then you go back in the vault and you plug the tapes in, because before you do the debrief, right, let's say we're doing a TI ride or an ACT ride. So TI is Tactical Intercepts, ACT, Air Combat Training. Well, I have to look at my own tapes, validate that the shots that I took were within a WEZ, Weapons Engagement Zone, so that they're valid, and that what we thought happened airborne actually happened, right? We called a kill on this, but it didn't kill the guy, right? We thought this one missed, but it actually hit in there. So we call that validating shots, right? Or go review your shots. that can take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. So in that time where you're like, are you tired? Yes, I'm tired, but I have a job to do. So I go do that job while I'm eating some food and hydrating and there and answering any questions that the students might have and setting up the students' debrief system and whatnot. Then we'll go and we'll do what's called a shot val. So one person leads the shot val. Everybody's kind of sitting in this kind of, think like if you've ever seen like a team room for like a football team where your wide receivers are reviewing tape and sitting in there, they just go from small to like hundreds. And you'll do a shot val for about 45 minutes where you go through each intercept and validate that the shots happened, who died, who survived, and then start over in there. Right. And so now we're probably about 8 to 9 hours into the day, depending, because it's at the weapons school, it's a schoolhouse. So it's a place of learning, and they're not always very good at running the shot valve. So it may take longer than it should. So we'll just call it an even 9 hours into the day. I'm like, okay, now we're going to go sit down and we're going to plug all 4 tapes in and we're going to review what happened in there. Usually we do it via a method called DFP development. So debrief focus point in there. That is a very structured methodology of going, okay, something went bad at time X. So, hey, Haas 1, why does Haas 1 die from this missile, from this contact at this time? So that is your end point. Now you work target backwards. Okay, the target is, why did we die over here? And you start asking questions to the left.
Reverse engineer the incident.
To go, oh, okay. We had a bunch of problems that happened from here to here, but right at this time, 10 minutes prior or whatever it might be, depending on what type of sortie you're in. A lot of times it's just a couple minutes prior. This decision happened or this action happened. And that from there on, we could never save or prevent what happened in there and get all the way to the root cause in there. So we give the students 90 minutes, 30 minutes per DFP, and there's usually 2 to 3 DFPs. So call it an hour to 90 minutes to prep those, get them on the board and get them ready. And then it takes about 45 minutes to go through each DFP in there. So let's see, math in public, we'll just call that 12 hours. It's a little bit more, but we'll just call it 12 hours into the day, right? And we're like, okay, now the instructors get the pens and the instructors debrief everything, starting from the brief, any notes that they didn't debrief in execution, and then the debrief in there, which can last up to another, I've had those days go 17, 18 hours, right?
Wow. Yeah.
But what we have over the recent times, especially with a lot of focus on the cognition side, we've tried to start to shorten those to go, hey, I don't want to be any more than 12 hours. So what I just described, we'll take some things out. We'll manipulate some things. I might be more active as an instructor if the shot bell is going off. But I would say your average day is between 12 and 14 hours. And the feedback that we really need the students to absorb doesn't start until that kind of about 11 to 12 hour mark where they're debriefing themselves. And there's something powerful about teaching yourself and debriefing yourself,
Absolutely.
right? And then it's on us as the instructors to look at them and go, I bet you have another 30 minutes before you're going to stop listening to anything I say, right? And you develop that skill as an instructor at the weapons school where you debrief a dude and then you read his grade sheet from the next day.
Yeah.
And he goes, and he made the same mistakes. He's like, what the hell? I just told him that. And it takes you like 3 months as a new instructor at the weapons school. You're like, why are these guys making the same mistake? I must suck. And you start to look at them and you go, you're not absorbing any information.
You're toast.
Here's all my notes. Why don't you go home and go to sleep, read my notes, and then why don't you come back and talk to me about that? So anyway, that's the day.
That's a day in the life of. So interesting. So we're going through these phases of preparation, knowledge assimilation, high level performing, back to passive knowledge assimilation, and then the capstone at the very end is now here's your takeaways. Right? You're at the 12-hour mark and you're hitting your takeaways. I try to equate this to like, that's like being in a board meeting. And I'm trying to imagine a board meeting that goes 12 hours with charts and graphs, as well as announcements going on and receiving texts and emails. And then at the 12th hour, and by the way, this is what you need to take home and assimilate. And it's a little hard. It's a little hard to think that that's possible. From a performance standpoint, how much are you emphasizing sleep and rest these days?
So we've started to emphasize it a lot, and I don't think the culture is caught up to the message, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Weapons school historically has been a place where guys are like, I'm just not going to sleep a lot. I'm going to try and outwork the problem. Now, in the past, could get away with that more. So the day I just described to you, we would usually go waterfall a schedule. Right. So I would have a morning sortie as a student. Right, I'd have that 12 to 14 hour day. We have what's called crew rest. So I have to be away from work for 12 hours,
Okay.
and eight of those hours are supposed to be uninterrupted so I can get sleep. So I can't go a 14-hour day and then take off at the same time the next day. It just doesn't, no time machine yet, so that doesn't work in there. So they'll waterfall you so that you can make sure that they get all the learning to the next day, and then you have a day off in there. Largely, the demands on the weapons school have gotten so big that it's hard to find what we call white space in the schedule to give students time to recover. So dudes could not sleep much before they flew their 2 days, and then they would just rest on their third day and recover. And we know that's not the way circadian rhythm, all the problems that it develops. That doesn't exist anymore. So if you're not getting your 7-8 hours of sleep a night, you're just building up a sleep debt that you're never getting out of at weapons school. And we started to do washout surveys, right? And most of our dudes are wearing whoops now. And the sleep data on the guys that are performing really well compared to the sleep data on the ones that are washing out, almost to a T, every single human being that washes out is below 4 hours of sleep a night. And so they're just not sleeping.
And since you're referencing Whoop is also tracking your sleep debt, right? So I just had this moment where I'm imagining, so when I travel, my sleep is always disrupted. I'm sounding like such a wimp. Like
Nope.
there's nothing I can say now where I'm not going to feel like I'm just this fragile man.
No.
So I go to travel and I always try to preserve my sleep. I try to adjust in time zones. But inevitably, I started accruing sleep debt. And so you start getting these messages from Whoop that says, well, in order to address your sleep debt, you need to go to sleep at 8:35 tonight. Oh, and then when it gets really funny, it's like, you got to go to bed at 7. I'm like, okay, your AI needs work because I'm not going to bed at 7. But I could imagine somebody in your program, it's like, you need to go to sleep yesterday.
Yep. Yes. It was like, I'm waiting because Whoop just changed their interface again. And Whoop's been a great partner of ours for a very long time. We love the stuff that they do, and they've enabled us to do a lot of things. But they changed their interface again, and I'm just waiting to start to hear how the students, as they interact with it, and the cadre as they interact with it, of like this thing, because you get different reactions with Whoop, right? There's some dudes who are like, love it, and it changes their life, and they make significant. It's just data, right? It's just information. Do what you want with it. There is a lot of human beings who go, I knew I didn't sleep. Why'd you give me a thing that tells me I suck at sleep? And I'm like, well, it's so you could make changes, right? And you start to educate them on that. But I'm interested to see how the new AI stuff that now is very forward on Whoop's app, I would say, what kind of feedback we get from that from the students.
Well, I mean, with all the biometrics, like you and I've talked about, I wear both. I've got Aura and Whoop.
Yep.
And it's interesting to see the discrepancies over time and which one you're going to trust. But it raises another interesting question, which is if you're wearing biometric of some kind, you're wearing either of these devices or even your Apple Watch, whatever it is, your Garmin, and you wake up and it says, oh, you're a red recovery, but you have to go do everything that you just described. That's just the way it is, right? Yeah. I mean, nobody's coming in and saying, hey, Bane, I'm sorry. My recovery score is really low. I got to sit this one out.
I got to sit it out. No, we're definitely not. We're not there. And I don't think we ever will be. I'm trying to remember his name, the LA Galaxy Bubba that you had on.
Michael Rabaska.
Yeah, I thought his take on not looking at any of your data on game day was really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm like, then people would never look at their data, and I don't necessarily want that. So what we have tried to do is go, hey, this is just that. It is data. We talked about all the sensory information that comes in the cockpit. It's the same thing with this. This isn't the only thing, right? This being the Whoop, isn't the only thing that should tell me how I feel. I've woken up on days where it says, you have a 17% recovery, and I have felt phenomenal, and I'm alert, and I'm ready to go.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting.
Okay, that is another input. This is just a piece of information. It's going to learn you. It's going to get better, right? But it's not the end-all, be-all, right? So if you are one of those people who's going to look at a red and go, oh my God, like freak out, and you have a big event that day, then just don't check your stuff, or just understand that it is an input in there. So I thought it was interesting to see the professional soccer world have some of the same takeaways that we seem to have.
No, I'd say that's really common in sport, that they don't want you looking at your data on game day because of the risk of it demotivating you, or as I ask often, I said, if you could only improve, I think I asked you this question, if you could only improve one sort of mental attribute of your pilots, what would it be? And we landed on confidence. And bad data is going to ruin your confidence unless you have that level of disassociation from it where you can just say, oh, it's only data. But that's really hard. Yeah,
it's super hard. But I think also that gets everything that we're kind of talking about over the last few minutes It just has me thinking about one word, which is culture. You asked like, hey, are you emphasizing sleep? And we're talking about data and whatnot. And I always have to be a little bit careful of how I say this, because people can take it the wrong way, which I normally don't care about. But I'm trying to raise some significant money for human performance programs in the Air Force right now, so I don't want to piss off the wrong people. But largely, human performance in the Air Force, I think if you objectively looked at it, you would call it a failure. Right? Because the thing that we want out of it is to go, I'm doing human performance not for human performance sake. Should we take care of people? Yes. Should we make sure that they don't have massive pain, they can't get out of bed in the morning, all this stuff? 100%. Right? But at the end of the day, our job is to go fight and win our nation's wars, deliver air power, whatever you want, fly, fight, win in there. And so if I'm doing human performance, it needs to connect to that. And our ability to connect that has largely been inhibited because we can't get high enough compliance, because the culture that the human performance programs land in is not ready to adopt it. Yet you asked about sleep. I was like,
Interesting.
The sleep message has been a thing for a while. We had squadrons in the weapons school that it was a known thing that you showed up, right, as an intel student, and you didn't sleep for months at a time, right? Terrible, well known, but that was just how the program was run. Like they've since walked that back, right? Especially starting to get, they're very involved with the program now and whatnot. And you're like, okay, so that's changing a little bit, but cultural change takes time, and you have to have people living it and leading it. And the same goes, it's like, hey, right? I mean, I'm talking specifically about Air Force, but it's interesting to see the fitness message that is coming from the top down now. Like, cool, if you want that to be part of who we are, that has to be part of the day. It can't be another thing. And so far, every human performance program has been another thing to fix a problem. Right? I call it a solutions shopping for a problem. We have a lot of solutions shopping for problems, as opposed to let's do a deep dive and understand the problems and the culture that those problems live in, and start to match cultural solutions, right, to cultural problems, and then actual solutions to human performance problems where they exist. And I think what we're going to find as we start to kind of peel those onions back, if you will, is that a lot of the things that are in the way aren't actually, human performance problems. Right, there are cultural problems. It has to be okay to walk out of work at a certain time. It has to be okay to say, hey, I need to adjust the mission profile today because I can't turn my neck to the left, so PFM isn't going to work out, et cetera. In there, and we're making slow progress at that. But and you've heard a number of my briefs, and we've talked about this. But it's interesting that it comes up in this conversation too. Is like everything you're talking about, right? There's scientific solutions that we could implement right now if the culture was ready.
Well, yeah, I mean, you say that, and I agree 100%. And it's a little bit more adopted and understood in the business world that culture trumps just about every structure. Culture trump, objectives, mission. At the end of the day, culture is what drives the organization, because it is how people will align their behaviors. They will not align their behaviors to metrics if the culture doesn't align with the metrics.
Totally. So was it culture trump strategy every day or whatever? Culture eats strategy for breakfast, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Interesting. I have to step back and think about this again. I'm trying to imagine if I could do this, right? I mean, forget whether or not I know how to fly. Like, I'm just imagining the workload physically, the workload cognitively. So let's back up a little bit. In today's world, how do you screen? How do you know that somebody has specifically, let's go with cognitive, because I actually think the physical is going to be easier to screen for. But is there currently anything to be able to help to predict how someone's going to mature over time? And equally, I think important, I'm curious to know, are there plateaus or saturation points? Like, I may be able to fly, but, and I'm going to butcher this because I don't know the hierarchy, but I'm never going to get beyond a Black Hawk, right? Like that's, or a cargo helicopter. Like, it doesn't move as fast. There's not as much going on versus I'm going to get into, an F-15 and I'm going to do a sortie.
Yeah, sure. So truth in advertising, I'm not full up on the pilot training. The example we're talking about now, like, hey, Black Hawk, heavy cargo airplane fighter, that decision process happens in pilot training in there. So start all the way left of that where you're like, hey, take my experience. I walk into a recruiter's office after 2 years as a financial advisor. I'm like, hey, I'm going to fly fighters. How do I do that? And she's like, laughed at me and was like, go take these tests. So they still do some tests, written. And then there's a couple of kind of cheap simulator tests, if you will, that are correlated with, hey, you're going to at least be able to fly something in there. And then what you end up flying is essentially a reflection of your performance in pilot training, right? So the way it works is you go through there's different programs out now. Pilot training when I went through was about a year long, 6 months in T6s, prop plane, and then 6 months in T-38s, a fighter jet trainer. So the first 6 months, most bases after that will go, hey, you're on a fighter track or you're on a heavy track, right? And then, so from there, the dudes that are on fighter tracks will go fly T-38s. Now, the dudes that are on a heavy track go straight to their platform. So C-17, C-130, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There. So there's kind of your, like, can you get in and do we think you might complete pilot training? And then there's, how did you do compared to your peers, rack and stack? And it's not just stick and rudder skills. That is a lot of it, but it's also, how are you as a bro, if you will? How are you as a teammate?
As a person? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. In there. And then at the end of, so for fighters specifically, at the end of T-38s, right, they'll rack and stack you again. Number one dude usually gets his number one choice, assuming that jet is available in there, i.e. the billets that people feel are available, and it kind of goes down from there. And there may be all fighters. There may be a mix of fighters and heavies and helos and RPAs. It just kind of depends on the desires as well as the availability and needs of the Air Force in there. I would love to tell you that there's a very, strict screening process each step of the way, but it is mostly done, I would call it subjectively with some objective measures.
That's what I would expect.
Which, as you know, we're trying to bring a little bit more of an objective side to it with some of the model-based human systems integration work we're starting to stand up. But I don't know that's all a bad thing, because what you see, I'm certainly one of these, is like I was average in my pipeline, was lucky enough to have some really good instructors and some really good teammates in pilot training that I got what I wanted with the Strike Eagle. And then I kind of bloomed later on in my first assignment, was able to be a first assignment instructor. But like, I think if you had talked to anybody that knew me in pilot training, like, yeah, Bane will be fine, but he's probably not your first assignment instructor guy, and he's not a weapons officer, and he's not a whatever in there. So I bloomed later on in there. And you talk about plateaus. I think most of the plateaus we see from people are self-induced from a mental
skills. A mindset standpoint.
Totally. These are, especially in the fighter world. So I'm going to transition from talking about a pipeline that I'm not well versed into the pipeline that I'm very well versed in. In the fighter world, you are working with human beings who don't fail and have never failed. That's how they've gotten where they've gotten. We were talking about culture a second ago. The reason the culture hasn't changed is because it's worked, right? There's a lot of things going on, but the only way, right? And that's part of the magic of weapons school, right? We do a thing called BFM camp in the fighter world, because when the students show up, these dudes have never failed. Now they know it's going to be hard, but like on day one, when we fight BFM, I'm going to absolutely demolish them, right? We're going to make it very clear that I have a lot to offer and to teach you, right? And there's different ways to approach that, and you'll kind of have a report card.
Hierarchy. Yeah,
that's right. You'll have a report card of the dude come in of like, hey, how are you going to approach this, right? But these are human beings who are not used to failing, and when they get to that point where they're like, hey, and if they have good instructors and good leaders, they can carry them through. That plateau doesn't last very long. The ones that kind of get lost in the cycle and in the mess, it is almost always a like, hey, I noticed we're struggling with this ride. What's going on? Like, oh man, I've been studying super hard, and I make sure I stopped working out so I could study an extra hour, and like I stopped talking to my family, and I adjust this time, and like I'm just focused on this. I'm like, ooh, why? You're giving up all these things. Let's talk about
a little overcompensation.
Yeah. Let's talk about what's important in your life. What's the most important thing to your life? I'm like, oh, my wife and my kids. I'm like, you just told me you stopped talking to them. What are we doing? He's like, but I have to pass this ride. I'm like, I bet if we keep some of these other things more normalized and get, back to the flow cycle, get some of that release, right? That the subconscious mind, your conscious mind is very stuck. I bet the subconscious mind moves the ball down the field in a way that you will never do if you don't let go in there. So to your plateau question, I don't have a good scientific answer for you, but anecdotally, I think almost all of it is very self-induced for various reasons. I talked about the one example, but there's a lot of it that goes into.
Well, it's interesting what you just said. I absolutely appreciate. These guys don't fail. These people don't fail. So I can't remember where I was. I was in San Antonio. I was meeting with someone. I can't disclose who it was because I can't remember, but it was in it was it was San Antonio, so that's AETC, right? And they were saying that what they're seeing as a relatively new phenomenon, and obviously this is much earlier in the system, right? Much earlier in the cycle, is they're getting these studs who in high school never fail, captain of this, captain of that, crushing it. And they put them in the primary course and they start to fail and they actually just get up and leave. Like they just quit. And they're like, where are you going? You worked so hard to get here. Yeah, but I failed, so I'm gone. So there seems to be a perception, and this is a theme that I think is worth unpacking a little bit around resilience, not necessarily just pure cognitive resilience, but this idea of mental resilience. And that, is it something that we're losing culturally? Because I think coming back to culture, is the culture of being on my phone, being less active, always finding very easy dopamine wins, creating a culture of people who are less able to fill these seats. And do you see that at all in your pipeline?
Yeah, we do. I think it's less apparent. But I have noticed, I don't want to say soft is the right word, because these are very hardworking folks.
Yeah. Vulnerable?
But vulnerable. The reaction to failure is so different. Right. And I think I have a little bit of a unique approach in this environment. It's like, I actually am seeking out ways to fail, because if I am just succeeding all the time, then I'm probably not learning and getting the most out of, right. And so can I find the next thing that's harder? You talk about the challenge skills ratio and the mythical 4% that who knows where that actually came from, but, right. Can I find the thing that's just a little bit harder than I am capable and chase that for a little bit and then get there and get to the next thing, in there. I think, we deal with it less at the weapons school because more like people know what you're coming here to do. You're coming here chasing excellence. We are getting less applicants at the weapons school, especially in my particular platform, than we are used to. The weapons school has historically been this prestigious, it still is, place to go. And it opens an unreal amount of doors. It gives you the ability to lead some of the best human beings in the world. It's a place you should absolutely want to go, but it's hard. I don't know that we have, and I hate the term generation because I don't know how to ever define it. And like, where do I also don't want to feel old.
Yeah. No.
Right. But I don't know that we have a society right now that wants to chase hard things, that wants to actually put in the work and make the sacrifice to be excellent. We want to, it's cliche, I know, but I just want the Instagram 6-pack. Right. I just want, like, and for the ones that are real out there and that are posting stuff, right. I wish they would post more of the work that goes into it, right. More of the, like, hey, the grind, and it's painful and it sucks, and the tears and all of the hard things and all of the questions of like, is this what I'm meant to do? Is this where I should be? Right. Because I think the biggest thing you come back to, right. And I talk to my students about this a lot, is why? Why are you doing what you do? And they're like, oh, weapons school. No. Not now, not for the next 6 months, not for the next year, not for the next 3 years. What is your North Star in life? I call my massively transformative purpose is a term that I really like, from the Flow Institute. Look, what is your why in life? And can you orient everything you do around that, or at least to be connected to that? Well, then you'll find that you're willing to do anything. And building a culture of human beings like that changes in an organization, changes a country, changes, you name it, in there. And I, to your point about like the dopamine hit, there's not a lot of dopamine to be found on that long, simply transformative
journey.
path. Yeah. Right. And that's okay. We have to be okay with that. And we have to be okay with the ups and downs and the understanding of like, hey, on this journey, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to stray from this path, and I may learn things and I may not, in there. So that may have been a little bit of a tangent.
No, it's the ultimate example of the journey is the destination, right?
Yep.
So we're wading into stoicism. I also like your way of cycling all the way back to Simon Sinek. From the beginning, now towards the end of the podcast, little trivia point. I was home back in Bergen County with some friends, and I think I started this. I'm like, who's the most famous person that graduated from our high school? And it turns out Simon Sinek graduated from my high school. But
pretty
then
up
when I
there.
go to tell people about it, I'm like, hey, Simon Sinek graduated from my high school. People are like, who's that?
What? Wow.
Because
Okay.
if you're not in this human performance and sort
Yeah,
of,
that's true.
start with
That's true.
why,
He
he's
used
not
to
that well
be,
known.
he used to come, I'm trying to remember, I think it was General Drowley maybe. He was close with one of our old either commandants or wing commanders. And so he used to come visit us about once or twice a year, and
Great.
he'd do like small group and big group discussions. So really like a lot of his work has been
Excellent.
helpful along my long journey, if you will.
That's excellent. So, couple points that I wanted to circle back to before we wrap up. Helmet fire.
Yeah.
So we're back in, mission. We're in the plane. We're in the midst, in the battle, in the suck, and you're not in flow.
Yeah.
Things are starting to become overloaded. Your attention's starting to fragment. Talk about that from a personal experience, if you've experienced helmet fire, and then also how do you deal with it, and then how do you train people to deal with it? Because that's your job, right? Your job is now to teach people. Okay, this is going to happen. Inevitably, it probably happens to everybody.
It does.
Here's how you deal with it.
Yeah. Let's see. Helmet fire. You usually don't know you're having one while you're having one.
Okay.
You usually observe it from the outside. And then the wingman's job to kind of bring you back, right?
Is it very obvious to your wingman?
It can be. At the level that we operate at the weapons school, a lot of times it's very subtle in there. But it can be very obvious. So I'm trying to think back, like let's think about some personal experiences of mine, right? Like where I've almost killed myself on accident because I was just so lost in the sauce in there. And so I'd say one of the earliest times I now that I think about like my stories, almost all of them are like pointed at the ground in like unsafe situations that I didn't realize I was in. And I've had some like good wingmen or good Wizzo to help out or indications in the jet that are like, who saved us. And so it's me and Drag Hickey, who's a mentor of mine, good friend from my first assignment. He's in my backseat and we're doing night strafe. I've never night strafed before. You do it like once in the B course, and the range that you do it on, so where we drop bombs is called a range. It's very bright, so it's not really night. We're doing it in the middle of winter in Idaho, in an overcast night, and there's no light anywhere. So
it's like your version of a halo jump.
Yeah. Yes, you're flying a black hole. Yeah. And there's some point the ground, pull the trigger, you're good to go. And you're like, why don't you just? That doesn't sound that hard, right? I do it in video games all the time. But there's a pretty exact science for how you make sure that the rounds hit the target. And people a lot of times think you strafe off of altitude. The altitude displayed in my jet is mean sea level, which means it does not account for any terrain.
Interesting.
Right. And so I have altitude. I can display radar altitude, but that's directly below my jet, not where I'm going, which is a problem if there's a mountain or something in front of you in there. So you have to do a bunch of calculations of like, hey, I'm going to actually open fire at this, cease fire at this, and then recover at this. And then, so that's over here in the kind of the top or in the middle right of the HUD.
Okay.
And then you set up your system so that there's a pipper, which is just a circle, and it's got tick marks like a clock. Mm-hmm. And then you have a range wrap. So the circle will have a solid border around the outside when you're greater than 12,000 feet away from the thing you're pointed at. You're using radar ranging on whatever you're targeted to. And then it slowly starts to kind of unwrap. And in the sim, it unwraps real nice and smooth, and it's really easy. You can just have this nice cross check in there. Well, I'd had a little bit of a rough admin night. The weather wasn't great, right? And I'm very out of my habit patterns, not to mention I'm flying nights for one of the first times. I think I just had finished mission qualification. So I'm a brand new wingman at a new base. So you're like, a lot of things are new. Not a lot of things are habit patterns yet. I doubt I had 100 hours in a Strike Eagle at this time. And for like frame of reference, I'm right around 2,000 right now. And so I am behind the jet. We're not quite at full helmet fire yet, but I am behind the jet, right? And my flight lead gets us into this strafe pattern, and it's not on the range. So it's new, it's kind of new references that we're trying to fly in the middle of the night. My NVGs are not tuning quite how I want in there. And so for those familiar, like you see the fancy like 4 goggle NVGs that the tier 1 Bubbas fly with, those are bad for your neck. So we don't fly with those. I have the old school. Yep. Sure. Yeah, they're super heavy. Yeah. 2 tubes, and they can be finicky to tune in a fighter helmet that vibrates a lot in there. And so we started this new pattern. And we were planning on doing a spacer pass, which just means, hey, let's orient to where we're at, right? Be slow and deliberate. But we had gotten lower on gas because it had taken us a little while, reference I'm behind the jet, take us a little while to get through our surface attack, our bomb drops in there. And so flight lead's like, hey, just based on gas, we're just going to roll in on this first pass. Now I'm gone. Like helmet fire is, because I have not set up my systems yet, and I am on the turn from downwind to base, and the next turn I'm going to be pointed at the ground in there. Drag has helped me out. He's like, hey, I got this. I just need you to actuate this HOTAS, do this. He's like, okay, go ahead and I'm ready, fine. Right, so we call 2s in, and the HOTAS I had actuated, I double clutched, and all that means is I'd push it twice. And so when I roll in, there's a certain HOTAS that will activate the kind of radar ranging through the pipper off the ground. But if you do it a second time, it turns it off.
Turns it off.
And so I had turned it off on accident, not knowing it, thinking I'm going to get it. And now, very experienced that I am now, I would look in the bottom left of my HUD, the bottom right of my HUD, and then cross-check the altitude and then back to the pipper. But all I see is a pipper with no range wrap. And I'm focused on a pipper with no range wrap. And we're screaming at the ground at 450 knots. Right? And we only start about 5,800 feet, like above the ground. Right? And I'm like, hey, no ranging. And Drag's like, yeah, that's weird. Right? And Drag's my hero at the time. He's been great teaching me an MQ. And so I'm just listening to Drag right now. He's like, that's right. I'll fire the laser. And the next thing we hear is pull up. And him and I snatched the stick and over-G the airplane, pulled 9.5 Gs when we're only allowed 9, right? And miss hitting the ground by 200 feet, which nowadays is not that low for me, right? We fly down there all the time. But when you're not planning on getting
But there's a difference between doing it deliberately and not doing it deliberately. Yeah.
That's right. And it was one of those moments. It's one of the few flights that I was like, oh man, you're just silent in the cockpit. I'm like, Drag, are you okay? And he's like, yeah. And I'm not named at this time. He's like, Nick, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I think we should go home. I'm like, I think that's a really good idea. Right. And we land, we watch the tapes. I'm like, fuck, thank God that system worked in there. But all of that is caused by this massive helmet fire that's slow and insidious. Right. And there's probably indicators going on. There's other ones that happen really fast.
Yeah.
Everything is good. Right. And this happened. Almost all of my helmet fire stories are like as a young flight lead or a young wingman. And there you're running an intercept and everything is good. And then all of a sudden something shows up that you weren't anticipating and you were on timeline. And now you spend an extra 5 seconds processing what just showed up and you're behind timeline and things spiral.
Because you're processing.
And now you're gone. You're like, I don't know what just happened, but everything that was nice and good, the formation's way out of position. Everybody's dying. What just happened in there? So there's different types. My observing it as an instructor, you can usually see it coming. And sometimes you can even see it coming in the brief.
Really?
But almost always you can hear it in either the taxi call, the radio drill, or the call for takeoff. The dude is missing a call. He's omitting parts of the call. Right, he's saying he's reading back the wrong information. He doesn't fly the departure correctly. Right, and you're like, today we need to just be paying attention to number 1, number 2, or whoever.
Interesting.
A little bit more. So with experience, you can start to look for it, right? And all that experience is built through almost killing
reps.
yourself lots of times.
Yeah,
through reps.
Yeah.
So,
what about recovery
from the actual incident, or
like
from
real time.
From the helmet fire? Yeah. So. I will say, I think a lot of times the flights, just two caveats. You learn through failure. So a lot of times we will let helmet fires go, not to the point of safety of flight, but it was like, hey, we got to experience this.
You have to have it in your portfolio. Yeah.
Yep. Combine that with a lot of times our flights are so short that one helmet fire, you're like, well, that's already, we just lost. And that's okay. We'll go back. Yep. That's why I say the debrief is so important. We might only get one rep or one try at a thing in there. We used to be really heavily focused on what we call in-flight instruction. It's really, really hard from one jet to another to talk another guy kind of back on. You can give little tips here and there, but in the middle of like an intense engagement, you're not doing any in-flight instructions. You just got to let it go. Yeah. And so getting a dude back from a helmet fire in flight can be very challenging in a short engagement. Now, if I give a nice break, I got to hit the tanker and get 20,000 pounds of gas a piece, right? That's going to take us, you talk about how much your audience doesn't want to hear about how much gas we burn.
No, it wasn't that. It was just that's such an interesting recovery opportunity, right?
Yeah. So, I mean,
Fueling in flight, right? Refueling
Yeah.
in flight is,
Yeah.
big recovery opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean,
Yeah.
like, there's transit to and from the tanker, right? So we get on Freak, we got a tanker, like, hey, and depending on the situation, it might be like, hey, man, why don't you let me take the lead for a second? Let's talk, right?
Nice.
Because I can talk, right? Or my Wizzo, it's nice having a second dude. My Wizzo can talk if he's the one observing some things, right? We can give some input and like, hey, how are we feeling? What is happening right now, right? Let's standard stuff that you would do with an athlete who's having a tough game at halftime.
Same thing.
Right. It's the same. Is there a natural break between the quarter? Natural kind of, can I get them to recognize where they're at? Can I get them to apply some of the tools that they've got? Whether it's a little bit hard to do breath work in a jet with there's a mask on your face. Right. But you can drop the mask if you need to and do some stuff. Or can we just like, hey, things were good here, here, and here. Let's focus on some positive things that we did and try and bring that into the second part of the sortie.
Okay.
All sorts of different kind of tools that you can apply in there. The real trick is when the dude can't get a second part of the sortie because we don't have tanky planned, it was a short sortie, right? And they land, and now they got to sit on that overnight. Or even worse, if they have a day between their next flight, they got to sit on that for a couple days, right? And they, oh man, I failed, and right.
Confidence,
and we see
record.
Yeah, exactly. And we see a lot of. We were talking about culture, and this ties into that a little bit. We see a lot, and I'm guilty of this too at times. And we see a lot of tying your identity to what you do and how you perform, not who you are and what you stand for.
Say that again, because I cut you off a little bit
No,
because I thought you were going
good.
somewhere else.
No. Go ahead.
So it's interesting. No, I want you to say it again because it was really interesting. You're coming back to sort of the why statement around, if you have a deep commitment to why you're doing this and who you are, that should manifest beyond your performance mistakes or your performance weaknesses. Is that right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's the end effect that we want, right? Is that to be able to live that way, to be able to perform and work that way. But what we see quite often is folks, to kind of repeat what I was saying, like you want is the tying of an identity to what you do and how you perform, as opposed to who you are and what you stand for in there. And it's subtle. Especially I'm talking about a job that at times takes 12 to 14 hours every day, right? You live and breathe. And we're famous for, you talk to any of our wives, Megan, my wife will tell you the same thing. They're like, all they do is talk about work when they hang out. Well, it's because I love my job and I love what I do. Right. And I just, we're passionate about it. And so it does become, I mean, like, so now you have a dude who's at an elite schoolhouse who's trying to be excellent. And they fail, and I'm like, okay. And so I'll almost always close my debrief if I'm the lead instructor for the day of like, hey, let's take we got the three things I need you to work on in the jet, planning, whatever, plan, execution, debrief. And there I try and hit one in each area where it makes sense. I'm like, talk to me about where you're at mentally. What's going on, right? And this isn't every debrief. But it's the ones where like we're headed for a cliff if we're not careful here.
As needed.
And try and get as needed. Like, talk to me where you're at, because the first thing you have to do, like, I can give them all the things. Like, I will go home and do breath work tonight. Go home and do the sleep. But like, I need you and I to be at a place of trust. So try and start this this type of thing, this type of talk early, so that by the time they hit that point in the course, like, hey, where are you at? Right, and you have that relationship. And we're like, hey, I can see you're struggling. What's cool about a schoolhouse like this? So I was telling not only are most of the instructors, or almost all the instructors in the 17th former students of mine. 17th is the squadron that I teach at, dudes that I put through weapons school, but a lot of the dudes, them and the dudes that are coming through now, are guys that I put through like mission qual, their initial MQ training or flight lead training in there. So you already have kind of this baseline level, and now it's taking it to the like, hey, we're going past tier 1 and flight lead, and we're going to like, I want to know you personally so I can understand where you're at. All that to say, you start to add in this kind of, call it human factors debrief of like, hey, this is where I see you're at. And quite often where you see them is drastically different
than where
they see themselves.
Sure.
They think, like,
sure.
I'm headed for whatever, a P ride, right? I'm going to get washed. All these things are like, man, your performance is great. Here's the things that are actually in the way, and it's not what you think it is.
Is mastery a word that gets kicked around at all?
It used to. Buzzwords are a weird thing in the military.
Yeah.
right? Somebody uses it too many times or uses it the wrong way. It's like, oh, we don't say that
And then
anymore.
it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it kind of depends on where we're focused. I've seen us in phases where we're very focused on kind of the process of education.
Mm-hmm.
How do we take education and modernize it and make sure we're teaching in the right way? There's a little bit of a push starting right now of like, we should stop doing these briefs for 60 minutes at a time where we're all sitting down. We should start doing some interactive things. Yes, we should. Right. And so mastery comes and goes in there. It's certainly the level that you're trying to get students to for everything
but it's
they
not
do here.
necessarily the right word based on cultural experience.
And I think right now the reason it's not necessarily in vogue is because we don't have the capability to get there based on resources.
Oh, interesting.
Between time, jets, and then diversity of mission demand. It gets really, really challenging. Right. I was telling you, my weapons school experience in 2019 was very different than what they're going through right now.
Mm-hmm.
Fly, day off, fly, Friday, totally off for academics for 2/3 of the course in there. Now it's Monday through Friday. And don't get me wrong, we work, weapons school is always a 6-day work week for the students. And each class is a little bit different, but in squadrons a little bit different. Most dudes will take Saturday off, lost steam, recover, and then work Sunday through Friday in there. Your instructors generally aren't in there except for the phase manager who's there to kind of guide them along the way in there. So it's always been a 6-day work week in there. But the pace of work on every day was not a sprint. And now I look at us as a schoolhouse and we're sprinting all the time. And we're doing it with less resources than we had. And so I can't get to mastery in certain areas. And so people don't want to talk about a thing that they want to achieve but can't achieve because it's outside their control.
Yeah.
That's probably more info than you wanted, but
no, hey, it's great. One of the reasons that I enjoy our conversations and hopefully everyone else listening enjoys the conversation is the depth of thought that you bring to this whole process. I think it's easy from the outside in, again, to think about, who are these people? Who are the people who become jet fighter pilots? And we talk about killing, we talk about war, and some of these words can be really hard for people, but you're people, and it is actually a deep, thoughtful, very complex person who can do this effectively. It requires a tremendous amount of personality as well as cognitive skills, right? It's both. And so, I appreciate you unpacking that for us. Well, as we head here towards the end, I'd love to ask sort of a wrap-up question in case a lot of the audience, I anticipate, people who are working in the cognitive domain, mental skills. So I'm going to ask two questions, actually.
Love it.
One would be, let's say this gets passed around and now it's a young person who's thinking, okay, I want to be Bane. I want to fly jets. I want to go down this path. Maybe not weapons school, but I want to become I want to fly jets. Early advice that you wish you had when you were starting down this course.
So I love the questions you ask. Having had these interactions, because I go speak at the Air Force Academy occasionally and talk to them about what's going on in the real world. I always ask them why first.
Yeah.
Right. We already talked about that. And try and get them to unpack themselves why they're saying this. It is as cool. I strap a rocket ship on every day and go fight with some of my best friends to make each other as good as we possibly can at our job.
Yeah.
Right. All the stuff that you see is as fun as it sounds. But if your why is not aligned with the job, there's a bunch of stuff that we talked about, right? All you see is the good things. There is a lot of failure. There is a lot of struggle. There's a lot of things outside the cockpit that drive me absolutely insane in there. And so I would first offer them to think deeply about who they want to be when they're my age, right? What do they want life to look like? And if that aligns with the military values, you forget, and I'm very lucky at the weapons school, a lot of autonomy. You're in a military, which is a hierarchy, so you're going to get told what to do a lot. If those all align, I've loved this quote for a long time, but now people having just watched Saquon Barkley's documentary are going to think that I stole it from them, so that's fine in there. But I had a football coach tell me when I was young that if you quit once, you're a quitter for life. And so if your why aligns, then you need to figure out how to build yourself into somebody who works as hard as they possibly can all the time at the things that matter. And then that's the third piece is which aligns with the first one, is you need to figure out what matters in achieving your goal.
Yeah.
Right. And then figure out, this sounds drastic, but you got to cut most other things out. I won't say everything.
Right.
You got to cut just about everything else out. Right. I'm not saying cut family out. I'm not saying don't date or don't have fun with friends. Right. But everything needs to point towards that first point, which is the align. And there's lots of ways to kind of walk through that and get through that. But that I don't know if that's advice so much as questions.
No, that's great
in there. But
I think it's great. Okay. And if you like that one, you're going to love this one. So now the core audience are more people that work in this space. So I'm either a mental skills coach, or I land this job as this mysterious cognitive performance specialist inside the Department of War. Advice for those folks, because what I have learned is that depending on which program you're in, there's some direction and there's no direction.
Yeah. I won't talk about where you just were because I don't want to guess at which one that was. But so, two answers to your second question. One, I am the older I get, the more I realize my job, while in the cockpit hasn't changed, my job outside the cockpit is changing, to be an advocate for the dudes that are now following me, which aligns with my purpose. So you can give my contact information. I prefer it be email, but if it's somebody you trust, you can give my cell phone to anybody, and I will talk to them for as long as they want and help them out in whatever way I can. So I'm happy to be an inside resource to help with those struggles, or anybody else that's interested in learning more about what we do and what we're trying to do in the human performance realm, cognitive realm.
So just to capstone that, so then reach out to me through my contact, and
yes,
I'll screen and then broker the introduction. Okay.
Yes, 100%. Yep. This is a strength in numbers effort right now, if you ask me.
It is.
In there. So the second piece of advice, and it kind of is similar, is you have to find on your base, right? In the example you said, the Banes, right?
Mm-hmm.
They exist. They're at every base. And a lot of times we know who they are, right? You can find the Hugos, you can find the Barrys, you can find the different folks that see the potential, that see the opportunity, but also understand the context and the obstacles and can steer you in the right direction. And where you're not getting guidance from the top, you can get what the operator actually wants in there. The best way to do that is to go hang out, right? And all the positions you mentioned are generally in flying squadrons. Go hang out in the squadron, right? Go introduce yourself to the squadron commander. Like, hey, do you mind if I hang out around the step desk and meet the guys? What's a good time to be here, right? Can I meet your weapons officer? Meet the dudes that you work with.
Yeah.
You will figure out really, anybody that's worth right their weight in this job will figure out really quickly where they should direct their efforts, right? And I will tell you, at times, especially in environments that I know well, or if I'm in a job that I know what I'm doing, I don't really want that guidance from the top. I want, just set me free, fire me that way. I promise you'll like what you get. Right. And so if that's your type, then that's what I would do, is go meet the people, go start to interact, work with the other specialists. That's another piece. I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but the other piece to this answer would be, you're probably, if you're a CPS or some sort of mental coach or performance coach, right, in this
you're
space,
part of a team.
That's exactly right.
Right.
Another downfall of our human performance efforts is we have not really defined how those teams operate. Who's in charge? Is it the PT? Is it the SNC? Is it the AT, LMT? Right. And all of them are very, very prideful in what they do. But if you can be part of that team and understand how they operate and move them in the same direction and move with them, I think that benefits as well. So a couple of different ways I would go with that.
No, I think that's, again, very, very thoughtful, very wise. Well, Bane, it's been a great conversation, as I expected it would be. I think we could go on for hours, so we may have to split this up and do another chapter.
I'm happy to come back anytime, though.
I appreciate it. I want to thank you for joining here at FocusMatters. And again, your offer, I think, is very gracious. So if you're listening and you're interested in connecting with Bane and being able to continue a conversation or get his advice, reach out through my channels and we can broker that conversation. Finally, again, love talking to you, love working with you. I'm looking forward to what we have planned. So on the neurotrainer side, we've got a pilot coming up that I'm very excited about. Looking forward to seeing if we can help the cause and help you guys be better at your job. But I just want to thank you for everything that you do for the Air Force and for our country. And I've really come to truly appreciate that this is a service position And so we're in your debt.
We're happy to provide that service. It's something we value, and we appreciate any opportunity we get to interact with smart, passionate, caring folks like you. So I can't thank you enough. It's humbling to be invited on a podcast like this and be able to just have a conversation. So thanks, Noah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, and we will talk soon.